Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert alongside Father Joe Grimaldi. As you tweeted out this morning, not a subject a lot of people want to talk about, but it's very, very important.
Extremely important.
I've been through it. You see it all the time. As a Catholic priest, you go to the hospital to anoint, as opposed to what used to be called the last rites, correct?
Correct, yeah.
All right. So you see it a lot, and I'm sure that the families are always around the person who's not doing very well. What we're going to talk about today, friends, is end-of-life issues, things that we really should be discussing sooner than later.
Well, one of the things is that when somebody is at the point of dying, and the family is coming in from all parts of the U.S., wherever they live, and the arguments that you see are horrendous, because the people have different ideas about the loved one, No, he didn't want to pull the plug at this time. No, and the other one says, yes, he clearly said that. Well, can you prove it to me? No, I don't have the paperwork here, and so on. And so then you have all of these arguments that ensue what's supposed to be a nice visit, a nice time to pray with the individual who is dying. And so there's a lot of arguments that take place because of that. And a lot of that is because people don't do their homework. I think all of us, at some point when we are in a good state of mind, when we're still healthy, when we're still relatively young, we can, with sober thoughts, declare our intentions clearly and make sure that anyone who has anything at all to do with the sickness and so on is aware of what it is that I want. And it should be in writing. But I think what's important is that the paperwork be done and the paperwork be delivered directly to the doctors, to each family member, and also pinned on the refrigerator, particularly when a person starts to get sick, so that when there is a need for an ambulance, the people come in, at least they could see the advanced directives that are on the fridge. And so that even there, besides the other people having their own copies, will be clear about what's to take place.
I think every family should consider doing that no matter what, but I think every member of the family should get a copy and have it in a file cabinet somewhere, so that when the unfortunate occasion does come around, everybody is literally on the same page.
Yeah, and I think not only handed a copy, but I think there should be a little bit of a discussion. Not a discussion, that's the word. That's not the right word I want. But basically to say, listen, this is what I really want. That's why I've written it down.
Right.
So I ask you to keep this in a safe place, so when the time comes, you'll know exactly what it is that I want.
There have been several articles written about this, and I found one by a doctor by the name of Dr. Karen Wyatt. A recent review article has shown that patients who have planned in advance for the end of their lives spend less time in the hospital, receive fewer intensive treatments, and have greater quality of life when they reach their final days. In addition, their surviving relatives experience less stress, anxiety, and depression during the process. Things to avoid end-of-life issues. Number one, putting it off for a later time.
I certainly agree with your thinking on that, and her thinking, if you want. I want to say this. All of us have experienced the situation where we receive something in the mail, and they ask us for a written reply on some important subject, whether it be this or something else. Well, we tend to put it at the desk, and we'll say, I'll do it tomorrow when I have more time.
Right.
Well, if you're like me, tomorrow may come, but I will not have written that yet. I keep thinking, I'll do it. Then the time passed. A month later, you see this piece of paper. Oh, I should have done this, and I forgot to do it. Well, sometimes you're in a good mind and you do it. Other times you just toss it aside. No, I would say this, that as soon as you know what you want to do, write it down.
I think it ought to be done while you're in a very good mood.
Exactly. Yeah. Not a good mood, not only a good mood, in a good frame of mind.
There you go.
And you have to be young enough, too, that you don't have to worry about
Right.
what the final situation might be. When everything is in order, not wait until you're very sick and panicky and all of this other stuff. Because let's face it, when you're panicky about what illness you have, you're probably not going to think rationally.
Right.
So I think it's important you do it when you're in a good frame of mind.
And probably in decent health.
Decent health, I would say, if you're relatively young, and when I say relatively young, you've experienced life by 50, 60, whatever it is, around that time it should be done, I think.
We'll go through this quickly, and then I have my own subset of questions I wanted to ask.
Sure,
but
sure.
I'm not sure I understand what choosing the wrong healthcare proxy means.
Well, that means this, that all of us should have somebody who's going to speak for us when I can no longer speak.
Okay.
Now, if we have already done the advanced directives properly, well, that somebody knows it and everybody else is aware of it. Every family member has a copy of it. And so it's not as important to pick, if you want, the proxy. The proxy has already been picked out. And he or she is going to carry out what the individual wants when that individual is incapable of expressing it himself.
In other words, I have, for example, a DNR, do not resuscitate.
Right.
I'm an organ donor, for example, and so
am I, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, another one, number 3, getting lost in the details. I think I know what that means, but I'd rather hear it from a pro.
Oh, I'm not a pro by any means, but I would say this. Getting lost in the details, what does nutrition and hydration actually mean, and can we do it at this time, at that time? I think all of those situations should be really settled ahead of time. And if you are a Catholic, you want to abide what the Catholics, what the Catholic thinking is on that, and be prepared to use it when you do your own advanced directives. So if we're not sure about anything, I think we should find out what it means and not to quibble about it when it comes time.
Getting lost in the details could also mean an argument within the family about cremation versus being put in the coffin and put in the ground.
Definitely, but I think that should also be... See, I think the advanced directives are comprehensive.
Yeah.
And in other words, they involve, as I said before, something is, you might think it's minute, but there are people that really believe they want this special kind of music, whether it be classical, Tchaikovsky, or whether it be popular.
I want rock and roll.
Or whether you want rock and roll. Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Played in the background in your last moments. So that even a detail like that should be included. Now, of course, for many years, the Catholic Church did not allow cremation. And some people still don't know that it's okay to have cremation. You know, the Lord is all-powerful. And yes, we will have new bodies in the next life. And the Lord can make them up from whatever it is that we have left behind, whether it be ashes, whether it be the remains that turn to ashes, whatever it is, the Lord can handle that. So I think it's a matter of putting exactly what you want, also the place, the cemetery where you want to be. Or maybe it's not in a cemetery. It could be in a columbarium where you put ashes particularly. Or it could be in a cemetery that does both. Many cemeteries have the full body interment or the inurnment, which is the ashes placed in the wall or whatever the case might be. But all of that should be in the advance directives. The advance directives refer to everything that the individual wishes to have happen when the person gets so sick that people have to make final decisions.
I found this fascinating, by the way, and I never, ever, ever thought about it. Another thing on this list that I found this morning, not discussing your plans with your doctor.
Well, I may or may not have said this, but what I want to say again is that when you do the advance directives, each of your family members should have a copy, but every one of your doctors, not just your primary care, but each doctor should have a copy. And the hospital should have a copy when you are admitted. This is why I said something to the effect that even putting, when somebody gets very sick, a copy of those directives on the refrigerator so that the people coming in with an ambulance service, they'll notice that there's a DNR there, so they're not going to resuscitate unless the person is hopeful of having a decent life.
Right.
And then all of the doctors that care for you are aware of what's happening.
Yeah, because there's going to become a stage where it's like we can't do anything at this point.
Right.
Let's allow your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister to peacefully leave, and we'll see them again soon.
And to die with,
well, I don't want to say
in a
soon.
human way, in a
Yeah.
with dignity.
Dignity,
huh?
yes.
To die in those ways, I think that's very, very important. There's nothing, death is definitely part of life. And
I don't think there's anybody that's avoided it yet.
No, but I think the more we realize that, the easier it becomes to make these decisions, which at first glance seem, I don't want to talk about that. That's the reason why people don't do advance directives.
They don't want to
They're
talk
afraid.
about their mortality.
They don't mind talking about the neighbors, but not about
right.
themselves.
Yeah, easily to lean over the fence and say, did you have advance directives? Did you have the end-of-life issues all worked out? Yeah, we're all good here, Ken. How about you? Well, we're going to get to it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people love to say.
Yeah.
But another important aspect, I think, is updating. What happens is when a person, let's say you do your advance directives at age 65, okay? I only choose that number
because it's a hallmark number, and a lot of things start to change, a lot of retirements,
so
Medicare, and all of that, sure.
Oh, I agree with you. And the thing is, maybe by the time you're 80, you have different ideas of what you want. For example, I know for a fact that there was a point in my life when I thought I wanted to have cremation. And then I thought about it and gave it a lot of thought. And not because there was anything wrong with the cremation. Actually, I even thought it was a good idea because there's a church that has it right outside the entryway of the church, the columbarium, so that they put the ashes there. So I thought this way, after Mass on Sunday, people are going to pass by and they might say a little prayer. So I thought it would be good to go there.
Yeah.
And then later on I said, no, I think I want the traditional. Mm-hmm. And so I now know that I want the traditional at 78, okay?
Right.
But at one time I was thinking about that. So people do change is what I'm trying to say. So it's good to update those advanced directives at different times.
Very, very important point right there. To update any change that you may have.
Sure.
Because
and notify
that's
everybody.
Really important. Do you ever run into, and this is a difficult question for me, ever see families divided or arguments breaking out over this situation? But I'm sure you do.
Oh, definitely.
End-of-life issues where families can be separated by the loss of a loved one.
Let me put it this way, that most often it happens when one of the relatives, I'm going to say one of the sons, just for sake of an argument, is living far away. But he's notified that the father is dying. Would he come into town? Well, he comes into town from afar, and he's there in the hospital room. Everything seems to be settled. Father wants such and such. No, that's not true. He wanted to be kept alive no matter what the situation. No. He stated very clearly what his wishes were. And so the individual gets even more infuriated, and it can happen that there is a split in the family because of that. And it shouldn't exist. And this is why I can't say enough how important advanced directives can be, because people just don't think of them as that they're going to matter.
No, they don't. And, you always hear the expression, hey, you can walk out the door any day and get hit by a bus.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You could.
And that's why you should have advanced directives.
That's why, you certainly aren't going to encourage young kids or anybody. I guess it's not something people want or like to talk about. You prefaced it in your tweet, the fact that, this is a tough subject, but you are in the wheelhouse of this all the time. You're asked to not only celebrate the life, the Mass, you're also asked to anoint, and you're probably often asked to referee, sometimes when the family gets divisive.
Of course.
And that's got to be a heavy load on you, as we've discussed before. But I think it's a really, really important for this to be discussed not only in your podcast, but in your house. Here's my question. When should that discussion take place? Should you get the family together, be it a conference call, Skype, or at a family whatever, and say, or do you invite the family over to say, look, this is a tough one, guys. Let's have a couple of ginger ales and talk about Mom and Dad. They're here and they want to talk about it.
May I ask you, what do you mean by a discussion, and who's involved?
The entire family, if at all possible.
No. The individual is the only one who should make those decisions.
Oh.
And this is why I say it's important that whatever decisions are made are communicated to the others. It's nobody else's business. If I want this is what I want, not something that you want. Okay.
Here's my question then, better framed this way.
Yeah.
The individual, mom or dad, have elected to put forth this particular document.
Correct.
Do you then invite the family over to say, I want to go over this with you guys?
Well, you could do it that way, but there's a less formal way of doing it, I think, by giving it to the individuals. And this is why I said, not a big discussion, but say to them, look, these are my directives. Do you understand what I've written? Are you okay with them? This is what is going to happen, regardless of what you think.
Right.
But this is what I want, and I have a right, because I'm in sound mind, and I could make up my own decision. But you have to do that with each important member of the family. By important, I mean at least each of the children, and then, of course, each of the doctors that you're seeing, and then even your special minister, if that's important to you, that he should have a copy or she should have a copy, whatever the case might be.
How about a friend?
A good friend, too.
A very good friend, a close friend.
A very close friend,
Yeah.
because sometimes they get involved in the arguments, but it's none of their business, really.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe cousins or...
Oh, yeah, but even with that's depending how close you are to those
Right.
cousins. I was very, very sad one time when this family, whose religion forbade them to have transfusions. And the only thing that kept the mother of the family from dying would be a transfusion.
You've talked about this.
Yeah, and
it's really stayed with you, hasn't it?
It's still on my mind,
Yeah.
because
She would have...
Yeah, and I went into the room, and I explained that this woman could live if you just make sure she has a transfusion. They were so upset with me that pretty much harsh words to get you-know-what out of the room. And I had to leave the room with a heavy heart, knowing that this poor woman who could have lived is not going to.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a hard one to hear, by the way, and I've heard it
course.
once before from you. Okay, I think we've done a pretty good job here, but of course, I always have more questions, and I know that you probably have other areas that you'd like to go into. Is there any final thoughts that you have on end-of-life planning, end-of-life issues?
I think we have to be clear as Catholics that we certainly withhold the withdrawal of treatment, if you want, only when we know that what we used to say, there's no hope. Mm-hmm. When we are clearly told that the person has no way of living a decent life and so on and so forth. Now, otherwise, everyone has a right to normal nutrition and hydration.
Right.
So we don't hold that. But once the person is pretty much on the way to meeting the Lord, if you want, then I think we withhold even the water and the food. But we make sure that that person dies with dignity, so that whatever drugs that are needed to help that person be at peace certainly can be administered, so that that person will die a natural death, if you want.
You're allowing them to die.
To die in a natural way.
In a natural way.
Right. And
with
relieve
some
them from pain.
With assistance of some medicine that may relieve any pain that they may be in.
Relieve any pain. And
Right.
that's the important thing. Not with assistance of medication, but medication that relieves the pain.
Exactly.
This is what we want to make clear. Because sometimes there's questions about what is hydration and what is nutrition. Well, as they say, every person is entitled to have nutrition and hydration. But when the time comes when that is useless, it's not going to amount to anything,
Right.
well, then it can be withdrawn as long as the person is not suffering. And so this is what we call palliative care. It's a way of making sure that the person is going to die with dignity and painless.
Right. And hospice is probably a very educated area.
Oh, definitely. Hospice uses palliative care,
Right.
Whether they call it that or not. But basically, that's what it's about.
Final question for you. You've often remarked that when you've walked into the room and you know that this person is going to pass, that when you have touched their hands and talked, for some reason they've recognized your touch and the sound of your voice, and they seem to have a little life burst. Do you see that a lot?
A lot. Most recently last week.
No kidding.
I went into a room. The person, I want to say jumped, if you want, lifted her head, literally, and said, "Oh, thank you,"
And died?
and died.
Oh, my.
Well, not immediately, but died, yes,
Oh.
within the next hour or so.
Yeah.
But at least she lifted
Really?
her head. That happened a few times.
Wow.
Matter of fact, it happens a lot.
You're going to tear me up here on that. I mean, that's, like I said, this is not an easy one to do. But I think it's so important, and you brought that to me, this, about it. I mean, you came to me and said, this is one we need to do. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the topic, and I really appreciate the discussion. And, of course, your background in that area. Because that's one of the areas that, boy, most of us in real time, real life, don't have to go through it that often. We all have to go through it. You go through it at least once a week.
Yeah.
Maybe twice.
Yeah, it could be.
Tough. I don't know how you do it, but you do a heck of a job explaining it.
Again, I want to emphasize for anyone
Yeah.
who is of sound mind and has arrived at a certain age, they should really do advanced directives and make those directives available to everybody who's important in your life, including your doctors and the hospital.
We will see you the next time, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you, Father Joe Grimaldi.
God bless you, Ken Calvert, and I look forward to it as well.
We're going to talk about patron saints and all sorts of fun things on the next Father Joe podcast. But as always, we want to thank you for coming by and saying hi. We look forward to doing it, and hopefully you look forward to hearing it as well. We'll see you the next time on the Father Joe podcast.
Take care. See you soon. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.